Our last lesson was a tougher one, multiplying decimals by 1/10 and 1/100th. You all did a great job, but I want to review it with you. I want to make sure that you understand why the decimal point moves to the left when you multiply a decimal by 1/10 or 1/100th. I know you can memorize a rule, but in order to really make this concept stick, we need to understand the reasons behind our actions. Let's start with the example 3/10 times 1/10. It's easiest to understand this by converting the decimals to fractions, since you already know how to multiply a fraction by a fraction. 3/10 written as a decimal has a 3 in the numerator and a 10 in the denominator. 1/10 written as a decimal has a 1 in the numerator and a 10 in the denominator. We know how to multiply fractions, so let's give it a try. We start by multiplying our numerators. 3 times 1 equals 3. Then we multiply our denominators. 10 times 10 equals 100. 3/100ths written as a decimal looks like this, 3/100ths. So 3/10 times 1/10 equals 3/100ths. Let's take a look at two more problems together. I've kept our work from the first problem we just completed up on the first line here. This time, let's take a look at the second problem, 3 times 1/10. Again, I'm going to write both numbers as a fraction. 3 written as a fraction is 3 ones. Remember, all whole numbers have a 1 in the denominator. 1/10 written as a fraction is 1 in the numerator, 10 in the denominator. Now I'm going to multiply just like I did in the first problem. I'll multiply my numerators. 3 times 1 equals 3. 1 times 10 equals 10. This fraction is read as 3/10. Written as a decimal, it looks like this, 3/10. Now let's go on to the next problem, and then we'll take a look at the pattern that we see. 30 times 1/10. Again, I'm going to rewrite them as fractions, so 30 written as a fraction would be 30 ones. 1/10 written as a fraction is 1 in the numerator, 10 in the denominator, same as the two problems above. Now I'm going to multiply my numerators and denominators. 30 times 1 equals 30. 1 times 10 equals 10. Now I need to simplify. 30 over 10 equals 3. Remember, the fraction line literally means divided by, so 30 divided by 10 equals 3. You will notice that in each product, the decimal place of the first factor moved to the left one place value. That's because you are finding 1/10 of a number. The number is going to get 10 times smaller. Let's look at it another way. I'm going to illustrate 3/10 times 1/10 with a bar model. I'll start by drawing a bar that represents 3/10. If I multiply 3/10 by 1/10, that means that I want to find 1/10 of 3/10. To find 1/10, I'd have to split this bar into 10 parts. And again, I want to find 1/10. So I want to know what one part of this bar equals. Now, can you see why 3/10 gets 10 times smaller when you multiply it by 1/10? Really, multiplying by 1/10 is the same as dividing by 10. And it makes sense. Remember we learned that the fraction line literally means divided by? So 1/10 literally means 1 divided by 10. So 3/10 times 1/10 is the same as 3/10 divided by 10, as you can see in the bar model. The answer gets 10 times smaller. As a rule, multiplication of 1/10 is actually the movement of the decimal point one place to the left. Multiplying a number by 1/100ths is the same, except 1/100ths literally means 1 divided by 100. So the product will get 100 times smaller. When a decimal is multiplied by 1/100ths, we move the decimal point 2 places to the left. The product of this problem would be 3/1000ths. But remember why this is so. It's because 1/100ths is a fraction. So this means that we want to find a fraction or part of 3/10. In this case, we want to find 1/100th of 3/10. So it's like dividing 3/10 by 100. We just want to know what one part out of 100 equals, which is why the product is 100 times smaller. Now that we understand why the product is 100 times smaller, let's apply this rule. If I multiply 3 times 1/100, I want to know 1/100 of 3. My answer will be 100 times smaller than 3, so my decimal point, which is just after the 3, will move 2 place values to the left. So 3 times 1/100 equals 3/100. In the problem 30 times 100, again, I want to find 1/100 of 30. So my decimal point moves 2 place values to the left, making the product 100 times smaller. 30 times 1/100 equals 3/10. Okay, now that we have that review behind us, let's practice solving some problems. Solve 8/10 times 1/10 in your notebook and then submit your answer here. I'll go over the answer once you submit. 8/10 is going to get 10 times smaller because we are multiplying it by 1/10. My decimal point will move 1 place value to the left to show 10 times smaller. 8/10 times 1/10 equals 8/100. Solve 2/10 times 1/100. 2/10 is going to get 100 times smaller because we are multiplying 2/10 by 1/100. My decimal point will move 2 place values to the left to make it 100 times smaller. 2/10 times 1/100 is 2,000. Solve 5 7/10 times 1/10. Remember, writing this down in your notebook and using arrows is really helpful and will prevent you from making careless mistakes, especially as you're learning and practicing this new concept. 5 7/10 is going to get 10 times smaller because we are multiplying 5 7/10 by 1/10. My decimal point will move 1 place value to the left, and my answer will be 57/100. My answer is going to be 100 times smaller than 3 4/10 because I'm multiplying by 1/100. My decimal point will move 2 place values to the left, and my answer will be 34,000. Okay, we're only going to do 2 more problems for practice. Solve 9 times 1/100. 9 is going to get 100 times smaller because I'm multiplying it times 1/100. So my decimal point will move 2 place values to the left, and my answer will be 9/100. Last problem, 72 times 1/10. Okay, last problem. Solve 72 times 1/10. 72 is going to get 10 times smaller because we're multiplying it times 1/10. Remember, multiplying by 1/10 is the same as dividing by 10. I only want to know what one part equals. So if 72 were my whole, imagine a bar, and I split it up into 10 parts, I only want to know what one of those are, which is why 72 gets 10 times smaller and my decimal point moves to the left. So 72 times 1/10 equals 7 2/10. Okay, good job with this. I'll check over your answers to see how we're doing, whether we need more practice. But right now, I want you to practice the handout that I've given you. You're going to complete some problems where you're multiplying by tenths and hundredths. Then you're going to complete some problems where you're multiplying by 10, 100, and 1,000, and dividing by 10, 100, and 1,000. So we're going to mix in what we just learned with what we've learned previously. Make sure that you have the handout that I'm referring to. If you don't have it, make sure that you see me to receive one.